Hi, my name is Dale. I've been teaching adjunct at Horizon since 2012. I also taught full-time at Briarcrest Seminary from 1997 to 2009. At Horizon, I teach courses in history, leadership coaching, theology of worship, technology, and worship in the arts. These all connect in all of the courses that I teach, and I approach them in a very united way. Every winter at Horizon, I teach a history class, so about that. The church, as described in Acts, began with lots of stories, but with very little prescriptive stuff about how she should work. Different churches in Acts are described in their variety, strengths, beauty, and also problems. But there's almost nothing prescriptive about how to worship, what happens when the church gathers, doctrines, key and essential beliefs like the Trinity, and leadership structure, who's in charge and how much authority do they really have. Through the next 2,000 years, worship, doctrine, and leadership in the church have changed dramatically and continue to do so. Followers of Jesus experienced persecution at worst and tolerance at best for the first 3 centuries of the church. Christianity was basically illegal. Then a key political figure emerged. He experienced a lot of conflict during his rise to power, and his methods were brutal. One day, he had a dream that appeared to be religious, so he asked a prominent church leader what it might mean. Apparently, according to that leader, this political figure was to be a kind of savior for the church and culture as a whole. After lots of conquering and killing, Christianity was declared legal and a lot changed. Worship moved into buildings, beautiful and elaborate spaces, public spaces. More defined liturgies were developed. Doctrine shifted in emphasis and included connection of church and state. The emperor was protector of the church. And church leadership became increasingly centralized and powerful over the next few centuries. Some say it was the best thing that ever happened to the church. Others say it was not. Just over 1,000 years after the time of Jesus, there was conflict in the Holy Land. In fact, Jerusalem was overrun by those who opposed Christian faith. Key leaders in the church believed that the best way to deal with this problem was through the military. They mobilized followers of Jesus by promising forgiveness of sin and debts if they would go and fight to liberate Jerusalem. A number of war adventures proved largely ineffective at liberating Jerusalem. But it did unite the church in hatred of a common enemy. Centuries later, many believed that these war efforts were more negative for the church than positive, but war ideology and military language remained common in worship, doctrine, and leadership. Think about onward Christian soldiers or evangelistic crusades, and seeing a lot of life as spiritual warfare. About 5 centuries ago, a few leaders from the backwoods of the empire became increasingly concerned about the state of the Christian religion. One Augustinian monk decided after a lot of education, he had a doctorate, that the problems in religion needed to be opposed. Problems like paying to receive God's grace, building elaborate and beautiful worship spaces on the backs of the poor, and general corruption of church leadership fueled the fire of this monk's protest movement. He was soundly condemned by the most powerful Christian leaders, but many of the regular folk found his message appealing. There was even an uprising. This protest movement thrived, and many other rebel leaders surfaced. Unfortunately, they often came into conflict with each other. That's what happens sometimes when leaders start a new movement. It's hard to believe, but Christians ended up killing each other, killing Christians, over issues related to doctrine, like how and when you should do baptism, worship, what really happens in communion after all, and leadership. Is the head of the church really all-powerful and always right? Some think this protest movement saved the church, but others wonder whether the problems just got worse. So if any of these stories sound familiar, you may have read a history book, or you may have noticed that these kinds of things continue to happen, even in our time. One of the most important reasons to study history is that we might understand the roots of current events. Another is that we might avoid the mistakes of the past. In the history course that I teach, we regularly wonder about how different events and movements influence doctrine and worship and leadership. My hope is that these wonderings help leaders today deal with some of the happenings that are good and some that are not so good, and maybe how to know the difference.